issues as we get into this one, but let's see how we go. So firstly, let me thank everybody for coming and joining us, and wish everybody a very good evening on what is actually a very beautiful day, at least for me in Delhi, and hopefully for each of you wherever you are. I've been really pleased to come and be joined by a fairly distinguished set of panelists, and I'll just spend a minute introducing them. But firstly, just on myself, my name is Nitin Prasad. In my day job, I get to be the chairman of Shell in India and responsible for its activities across the board over here. But of course, my night job and my personal passion is being a father and with the helping my kids sort of grow and develop, and also being a very proud Indian. And I recognize that in my personal side is what drives me to have such a strong passion on this particular topic about air quality, and I've been really pleased to also be the CII chairman for the CEO Forum for Clean Air. And I'm really happy to be here tonight because, as in my dual capacities, I get to see and hear a lot in terms of what can we do in terms of clean air. And so it's really nice for me to be sitting on the other side of the table and moderating a session instead of being a panelist, so that I can try and help everybody hear what I get to hear on a regular basis about, one, how urgent this is, but two, how much it is actually a solvable problem if we just put our minds to it. And we will just spend a little bit of time on that. The panel that I'm pleased to be joined here with today, and I will ask them to spend 1 or 2 minutes just to introduce themselves, but we do have Ms. Richa Upadhyaya, and I'm going to apologize upfront for all kinds of mispronunciations, but she is the portfolio manager for India and strategic communications for the Clean Air Fund. Dr. Michael Benjamin, who is the Chief Air Quality Planning and Science Division for the California Air Resources Board. Mr. Marcello Mena, who is Director Climate Action Center, and Ms. Priya Shankar, who is the India Director for the Environment Program and Bloomberg Philanthropies. We'll get a chance to hear from each one of our panelists, and hopefully we'll also leave some time for some good Q&A and to have a really good and engaging dialogue. We are, of course, sitting in interesting times, and it'd be remiss to sort of not comment about what have we sort of learned from COVID and what are the implications from a clean air sort of perspective. And as I was looking through the statistics once again, it's just striking that we come back and suggest that air quality and poor air health can kill 7 million people a year. 7 million people. And without being, being sort of insensitive about it, but that's actually more than what the pandemic has cost us in just sheer lives. And that's in 1 year's time. And 20% of that, 1/5, is actually in India. But of course, the air quality has a dual problem too, in that it not just affects lives and impacts people's health, but it also has a significant economic impact. We have seen GDP be impacted up to a percentage point, if not more, basis the economic impact of poor air quality. And I've spent time in textile clusters who have come back and told me things like, the air is so bad that we cannot even generate pure white cotton, or we have productivity issues because the air quality around us. So I have seen and witnessed and heard firsthand how the air quality can impact both health, but also the economic side. And this is in many ways a far more dangerous, dare I say, disease or pandemic than perhaps even COVID is. Now, I don't want to make light of where we are, but it is important that we come back and we recognize what is right in front of us and something that is impacting us on a regular basis. But there is something that the pandemic taught us. And what it has taught us is, one, that we can reverse the impact. All of us would have seen clean skies, clear days, beautiful air quality days. In fact, I saw statistics that suggest Delhi has seen good quality air days, more good quality air days than we have seen in the last decade and a half. And that's significant. So it is possible in a relatively short amount of time to be incredibly impactful to address this problem. And also, what we saw from the pandemic is if we all pull together an institutional capacity along with corporate capacity, along with all the other sectors that are part of our society, then we can make this change in a very rapid way. And the CII, I'm very pleased, has taken this up as a very strong mantle, and that sort of nature. Although we were 1 year ahead of time, in 2019 we had instituted the India CEO Forum, which is a set of committed business leaders who are very much focused on delivering this particular change and delivering this quickly. And I was pleased to have a subset of the CEOs in a direct conversation just a few weeks ago. And what was really striking was, if nothing else, they were very much aligned with the messages that I'm sharing right now. And in fact, we were pushing ourselves to do things even faster and in an even bigger way. So the urgency, from our perspective, is absolutely there. And the sense that we have to learn from the pandemic, we can make a difference, we can do this quickly, was absolutely clear and present. We should also sort of recognize that there are things that we have done very well, and I think that this is about what this forum and this session is all going to be about. So my hope for an objective out of this session is going to be, one, let us come and recognize and understand what our successes have been, and then also talk about how do we scale them, how do we replicate them, and take them across the country. There has been tremendous work that's done in California and Chile and other parts of the world, and our opportunity is to learn from these parts of the world in terms of what they have done. And we should not be, we should be unashamed to come back and copy and borrow and learn from all these individuals who we have with us today. And I'm really looking forward for that as a second objective for this particular forum. And the last one is, which is what I addressed a little bit earlier, is how do we come back and really structure ourselves, to organize ourselves, to rethink how we can leverage the combined capacities of all of our institutions that exist, whether it be the industry forums, the governmental institutions at the various, to the center, the state, local city levels, businesses, academia, whoever it may be, to come and pull together in a multilateral capacity to be able to come back and deliver this change. Just as I before I just quickly hand over to our first speaker, I also wanted to come back and recognize and suggest, in the spirit of sharing some of our successes, one of the things that has been an incredible project, and full credit to Seema and her team for really driving this forward, has been the crop residue program in the impact that it has in 102 villages in Punjab and Haryana in the last year's time frame, where we were able to take, for those 102 villages, 76 of the total produced rice straw and prevent it from burning, which is a significant impact. That's yes, it's only 102 villages, and that's the point where we need to come back and think about scaling. But we should not discount that the challenge that we have talked about preventing farmers from burning crop residue is something that can be solved, and the CII has taken the leadership to be able to do this. And equally have pulled us together in a study that I'm very pleased to be releasing at this session at the 15th Sustainability Summit, which is titled Impacts and Learnings of Crop Residue Management Program. And you can see this on the screen right now. We would love for everybody to look through this, send us your feedback, and I'm particularly really interested in learning what more can we do to scale this up. How do we go from 102 villages to 600,000 villages that's across India, and continue to take this particularly forward. So the report can now be accessed online by all the participants. And on that note, I really am looking forward to our panelists and looking forward to hearing from them and learning from them. So in no particular order, let me invite Ms. Richa. Richa, would you like to kick us off and give us your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you so much, Nitin, and thank you to Seema and the Sustainability Center for organizing this panel. It truly is at a very opportune time, as we have recently, like Nitin said, experienced some of the cleanest air in Delhi, particularly, and many cities around India. Most people had not experienced blue sky This pandemic has forced us to really sort of look at how we value sort of environment and the link between environment and health. And so this conversation really does come at the right time. Like Nitin said, I work for the Clean Air Fund. The Clean Air Fund is a very newly established philanthropic initiative that's been set up to really tackle the problem of air pollution. And understanding that many countries around the world, 90% of people, in fact, around the world experience unhealthy air or air that is not up to the WHO standards, and that there is an urgency to move solutions on air pollution very rapidly. And if we are able to do that successfully, we can also start to decarbonize our communities and our countries and tackle climate change. The Clean Air Fund has recently published a couple of very interesting sort of reports and findings. And I'll just sort of, my presentation will just sort of summarize what these findings were. And I think it could help us to take this conversation forward. I was going to share my screen and go through a presentation, but I am unable to find screen share. So let me just talk through it and not waste any time. So one of the first sort of points I wanted to, I'm a presenter now. Let me see if I can do this. Terribly sorry. No, I still can't share my screen. Fine. One of the things that we've obviously been very busy looking at is the correlation between the pandemic, COVID-19, and air pollution. We have recognized and have done a scan of a lot of different research out there to understand what that correlation might be. And while we know that it's a very nascent area of research, we have seen instances where that correlation is starting to come to fruition. We know that correlation between sort of high air pollution geographies and high rates of deaths related to COVID exist, and those numbers are getting more visible, and the research is getting deeper. In the US, an early study found that even 1 unit increase in PM 2.5 exposure was associated with almost 8% increase in deaths. And there are other preliminary research that's coming out of other parts of the world, the UK primarily. And while, like I said, this research is nascent, we are starting to get more knowledge around and more understanding of the correlation between air pollution and COVID-19 and other sort of pandemics like that. We know that COVID attacks your respiratory systems, and so for people living in high pollution areas, we're already vulnerable due to compromise of our respiratory systems. And there's no doubt that COVID impacts the vulnerable, especially poor communities, much harder. And many of these communities are exposed to air pollution. And so there's a real issue of equity as part of how we've been dealing with this pandemic and how we need to deal with our air pollution action as well. The Clean Air Fund recently conducted a survey. We surveyed 5 countries, the Great Britain, India, Nigeria, Poland, and Bulgaria. And we wanted to really understand what the perception of the public was around air quality, and particularly during the lockdown, where it essentially was a really massive natural experiment that was happening in front of our eyes. We really wanted to understand what that perception of the public was, and we found that 2/3 of citizens in all of these countries really support stricter regulation to tackle air pollution. We found that people really started to make that connection between air quality, environment, and health. And that nexus, I think, is something that we should really think about and deepen our understanding around as we think about strategies for both air quality and economic recovery coming out of this pandemic. We also found that 70% of the people and in some cases, particularly I believe in India and Nigeria, the percentage was even higher, they really saw air quality as a public health issue. And again, this is really is indicative of the fact that people are correlating their health with environment. And it's also a really huge opportunity for strategies around air quality to really lead with health as a primary focus. The other sort of findings around the perception survey we did was that people just wanted to see cleaner air, and the experience of blue skies during the lockdown really kind of enhanced that experience and really enhanced that need to see communities be cleaner. So that was one of the reports that came out for the Clean Air Fund. And in fact, today is a very auspicious day for us. We put out another report. This is very sort of UK-centric, but I think it's some of the learnings and insights from this report can be used for India as well and globally. So we recently, just today actually, put out a study looking at the economic impact of air pollution for the UK. And the findings have been quite incredible. The headline result is that the UK economy could benefit to up to £1.6 billion each year if the UK was to achieve WHO standards on air quality. The study also found that cleaner air would obviously reduce mortality and disease, which would mean that there would be increase in productivity and higher number of years of people being able to work. And in fact, the number of deaths that could be prevented in the UK alone, if it was to reach WHO standards, was close to 17,000 people. And the number of days that could be gained from reaching those standards, or could be up to 3 million more working days for the UK if they reached WHO standards. And so this really kind of demonstrates that there's a very direct and clear link between productivity and an economy with air pollution. And the Clean Air Fund is now planning to do a very similar study here in India. In fact, we are just about to launch that study in the next few weeks, and we should have those results out hopefully by the end of the year or early next year, and we're happy to share that results as they come out. The other key thing that I wanted to touch upon was a set of recommendations that we've developed both for governments and businesses. And so quickly on those, we've sort of come up with 5 things that governments can do and 5 things that businesses can do as we really respond to COVID, as we plan our economic recoveries, and as we plan to come out of this pandemic. So quickly on the 5 things for governments is number 1, the governments must develop and resource joint national and national health environment strategies with a very specific focus on tackling air pollution. Number 2, governments should provide and only provide economic stimulus to industries which make ambitious and measurable commitments to cleaning the air. Number 3, governments must support the repurposing of city streets for walking and cycling. Number 4, governments must implement and enforce laws and regulations to retain and build on the improvements in air quality experienced during the pandemic and really not forget about the blue skies we experienced. And number 5, governments must work with other governments to tackle transboundary pollution. So that's on sort of the policy government side. For businesses, the 5 things that we think businesses should take forward is number 1, businesses must lead the way in clean air technologies and innovation and create new markets and an economic case to move towards reducing emissions. Businesses must focus and create green jobs and support the government to provide incentives for green recovery. Businesses must reduce emissions in their own workplaces, in their own factories, and mobilize their employees to adopt sustainable lifestyle. Businesses must become strong advocates for clean air and support city and state governments to accelerate solutions. And lastly, we believe if businesses have a lot of power to both influence their consumers as well as policymakers to act swiftly on clean air solutions. So I'm going to stop there. I know we only have 5 minutes. I don't want to take up more time, and I'm happy to take more questions as they come.
Great, thanks very much, Richard. We'll jump into the Q&A after all the panelists. Thank you for those thoughts, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions on the reports and the outcomes that you have. Can I invite Dr. Michael Benjamin? Michael, would you like to please go next?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Good evening in Delhi. It's early morning here in California. I was hoping that I could share my slide presentation, but it appears I don't have that capability. There we go. Let me try. Perfect. So can I just confirm, is everybody seeing my slide presentation?
All good, thank you.
Great. So my name is Michael Benjamin. I'm Chief of the Air Quality Planning and Science Division at the California Air Resources Board. And in that capacity, I'm responsible for developing California's clean air plans that help us to meet federal and state air quality standards. And so this evening, I'd like to share with you a little bit about California's air pollution control program and how we think it can serve as a template or a model for attaining clean air in other parts of the United States as well as the world. So California and India have a shared challenges when it comes to air quality. In the 1940s, California had extremely poor air quality, and I know that that is something that India is continuing to address. And so in California, really our issues began in the 1940s after large parts of California urbanized after World War II. And these photographs were taken in the 1940s and 1950s when air pollution levels reached 700 parts per billion ozone, which is, for reference, the current standard for ozone is 12 parts per billion. And there was a recognition at that time in the 1940s that air pollution had a significant health impact, and there was widespread public outrage about the levels of air pollution and a demand that government respond. And so in response, the first thing that happened was development of a local air district in Los Angeles in 1947, and then afterwards, in 1967, the California Air Resources Board, which is a statewide air quality agency, was established. And then in 1970, President Nixon created the United States Environmental Protection Agency. So he created a national air quality agency. And he also signed the Clean Air Act amendments. And these were critical in three ways. One, they established national air quality standards. Second, they established requirements for state implementation plans, which is a requirement that non-attainment areas meet the federal air quality standards. And then the third key element is that it provided California unique authority to adopt more stringent air quality standards than the rest of the country, or more stringent laws. And then following this framework being established at the local, state, and federal level, there were many laws that were then adopted at these three levels of government that addressed both stationary sources of air pollution and also mobile sources of air pollution. In response to this framework being established, what we have seen in California is a dramatic improvement in air quality, as well as at the same time, a really rapid increase in growth in our economy. And so we have seen population increase. Our population has doubled since the 1960s. The number of vehicles has increased by a factor of 4. vehicle miles traveled has increased by a factor of 5, and GDP has grown by a factor of 40. And this is at the same time that we have had regulations, very stringent regulations placed upon industry to reduce air pollution. So we think that it is possible to grow the economy, but at the same time to address air pollution. And for us, really the basis of the sort of making progress and addressing air quality challenges is having programs that are built on a strong scientific foundation. And this map shows the network of air monitoring stations across California, which is really the first step in establishing the extent of the problem and then allowing us to develop regional solutions to that problem and to track progress over time. And other elements of what we see as being really critical to being able to do effective air quality regulations is having a robust emissions inventory that enables us to understand what the sources of air pollution are, and then to understand what the causes are so that we can develop really surgical and precise air quality regulations. And so based upon that foundation of science, we develop regulatory strategies that are very targeted at the nature of the air quality problem. So for example, we may have an air toxics control measure that is focused specifically at addressing chrome plating industries. And we may have, on the other hand, another regulation that may be reformulating gasoline to address exhaust emissions from vehicles. Another key element to our strategies is investing in incentives to spur technology advancement, and that's been very important as we have encouraged the development of things like zero-emission vehicles. And then finally, a third element in our strategies is a very strong public process and stakeholder outreach. The California Air Resources Board consists of 13 members who are appointed by the governor and who represent a wide group of stakeholders. The meetings of the board are held in a public forum. There's an opportunity for public input and public comment. And we have also recently started to develop what we call a community air pollution protection program, where we actually go out into communities and have community meetings in the evenings. So as I mentioned, we have found that incentives are increasingly important for us to be able to improve air quality. And that's because in California, what we have found is that we've exhausted many of the command and control strategies, and that what we need to do now is to come up with financial ways of encouraging citizens and industry to adopt advanced technologies. And so we have a lot of different programs. I won't go into all of those here, but a lot of programs aimed at encouraging that early adoption of technologies and also targeted turnover of equipment. And so the keys to effective implementation of our strategies or programs, first is a definition of clear jurisdictional responsibilities between the national, state, and local levels, a collaboration between all of these entities to address the full scope of the air quality problem, a very robust permitting and enforcement program to ensure there's a level playing field for all of the parties involved, monitoring and reporting to assess progress over time, and then making adjustments to our strategies as we determine that perhaps some approaches don't work. As I mentioned, enforcement is a key component of our effectiveness in California. It provides a mechanism to ensure that emission reductions are achieved. It creates a deterrence against noncompliance. As I mentioned, it also ensures a level playing field amongst the different sources and industries. And the penalties really are a tool that is very helpful in achieving these goals. And so we have a dedicated staff of over 150 people who perform this important function of enforcement. And so in summary, here's what we've learned in California over more than 50 years of experience. First, the importance of having clear requirements authority, and milestones established. And that's where the state implementation plan process that's been formulated under the Clean Air Act is especially helpful. Second, the need for core science to inform the most effective control approaches. Third, ongoing monitoring, enforcement, and public reporting so that people have confidence in what we're doing as a government agency. Fourth, coordination with local and federal agencies to make sure that we address sources that are outside of state control, and also importantly, so that we're able to address sources of pollution that come from outside of California. And finally, a recognition of the economic benefits of improved health and climate co-benefits. By monetizing the health benefits that we see, it gets more public and industry buy-in when it comes to our programs and a true recognition of the societal costs of air pollution. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael, and a really interesting experience from the California side. Let me then turn to Marcelo. Marcelo, are you okay to go next? And then we'll have Priya round us out.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
perfect, and I'm going to share my presentation. Thank you so much. It's a great opportunity to discuss what has been achieved in Chile on issues of air pollution. Just a second. Okay, I'll share right now. So, okay, you can see the presentation. It says bringing cost-benefit analysis to action of cleaning the air, I assume, right? Okay, if so, I'll continue with the presentation. So for many years, we have thought that Santiago has been one of the most polluted capitals in the world, and it had been until the 90s. Upon recovery of the democracy, we started taking action, and a recent study by the EPA has shown that had we not taken action to reduce pollution, we would have roughly 10,000 more premature deaths per year in Santiago, and this had been even more in the COVID crisis. And to do so, it's been more than 30 years of work in banning open burning, banning agricultural burning, getting rid of dirtier diesel public transportation, and cleaning up the industry. But also a lot of wood burning restrictions, starting with a ban of open chimneys to all banned wood burning stoves as currently happens. But this center of the focus on the capital of the country overlooked the air pollution that occurred in other smaller cities that are actually much worse and use wood burning as the central means of heating. The same way that in India, cooking biomass burning causes deep impacts on air pollution. In the case of Chile, this comes in the wintertime when people use this dirtier, cheaper fuel to clean to heat themselves. And so therefore, in 2014, we started doing 14 new attainment programs to really take action and really make use of the new PM 2.5 standard that we had adopted. And we started with a new pollution attainment program for Santiago, but also with a lot of novel tools. And I'd like to just mention a couple. Pollution taxes based on emissions of CO2, PM, NOx, and SOx for large point sources, with this tax being higher with the population density, when higher population densities or in non-attainment areas, and therefore causing a real economic signal to really cause big reductions of emissions. That acted like a de facto emission standard, and some sectors were reduced in 95% of the particulate matter. But also, this really impacted the power generation sector and helped our current coal phase-out agreement that we have achieved that will occur before 2040. Today, around 40% of Chile's power generation is from coal, and we're going to phase them all out within the next 20 years and probably within the next 10 years because all of the different operators are doing this faster than we expected. But also, we've been this really cleaned the air, and you can see this picture of Tocopilla in the north of Chile. Before in 2009, non-SEMS monitoring. People would shut off emissions controls when there's no enforcement. Now we have real-time measurements of emissions. They go directly to the superintendent of the environment, and he reports directly to the tax office, and based on those emissions. But also, how to clean the transportation system is really important, and it's not cheap. And so one thing we did was rehash our initial successful way of banning cars that were not at the beginning with catalytic converters around 30 years ago. These are already pretty old, so we now exempt from these regular bans of driving in the wintertime vehicles that are Euro 5 and above. And this really accelerates the renovation of the fleet and reduces structural emissions of the transport sector. We have seen a successive progress in making cleaner buses. We adopted Euro 5 with filter, diesel particulate filters almost a decade ago, more than a decade ago. And now we have adopted the Euro 6 standard for new buses. And this has really allowed the jump to electric buses to be much smaller. We have around 700 buses per day operating, roughly 10% of the Santiago's fleet, and we will reach 100% electric buses by 2030. And this comes at a lower operational cost than diesel buses. Also, the total ban of wood-burning stoves will bring great benefits at very small cost and save roughly 700 cases of premature mortality per year. And in sum, we have multiple actions that have much better benefits and costs for a city like Santiago. We did this for 14 other cities, and this has really good outcomes. I also like to highlight the fact that I'm a modeler, just like Saratko Tikunda, who you may know, and I come from the same school that he came. And we worked under the concept that you can't change weather, but you can prevent air quality episodes if you prevent emissions. And we adopted a model that was able to take measures way before the accumulation of pollution occurred. And this, the science we use to deploy a national operational model that in each city, each regional minister decrees whether wood burning stoves can be used, whether you could drive, or whether industry could operate. And this has led to roughly a 70% drop in air quality episodes in Santiago. And we also had to overcome some cultural clashes, such as the fact that some of the bad air days we had were when Chile was doing quite well in soccer and people were grilling in the worst dispersion conditions that the city had. We also did a lot of emissions trading. We rehashed the emissions trading scheme based on the South Coast Air Quality Management District equivalencies. So if you are a new source of NOx, you have to compensate your emissions by 120%. But since there's not a lot of ways to reduce your NOx emissions, you could just take out some wood-burning stoves, you could put some filters on some heavy-duty vehicles, or you could switch out some old trucks. And these equivalencies are, defined by science and are less arbitrary than we had done so before. The outcome of reductions of pollution has been quite large, around 30 to 50% reduction in many cities, and this has reduced the premature mortality in roughly 2,000 cases per year. But also, in terms of emergency room visits, the drop of emergency room visits has been substantial. Overall, the banning of smoking in public areas probably had an effect. This happened in 2013, but in 2014 we started taking all these multiple actions, and which have led to a drop of 17% of total emergency room visits in cities with pollution controls. Whereas without emissions controls, we had a rise of these respiratory visits. When we integrate our net zero emissions NDC that we published as COP25 presidents recently in the UN, we see that our net reduction of emissions will also cause a net economic benefit. And if you value these benefits today, they're roughly 2.5% of our GDP if we reach net zero. So just final comment, Santiago, this last winter had really great air, but still the richer neighborhoods had much lower exposure to pollution and much lower mortality rates of COVID than the poorer part of town, but also polluting way more, showing that there's an environmental justice issue we need to address in Santiago and in Chile. So a lot of progress has been made, a lot more needs to be done, certainly, but the benefit of what we did was actually putting health at the heart of our action. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. And last speaker, Priya, Ms. Priya, would you like to take over?
Thanks, Nitin. I want to congratulate CII, Nitin and Seema on their Cleaner Air, Better Life initiative, which we're delighted to be working with together with the Clean Air Fund and Indian industry partners. In India, we're also honored to be working in partnership with the Ministry of Environment on a technical assistance initiative in support of the National Clean Air Program. As part of this, we're supporting a national knowledge network on air pollution and technical partnerships in cities including Patna, Bangalore, and Surat. We also support an international network of cities, C40, which last year brought together 35 cities to commit to an air quality declaration. And we're delighted that 2 Indian cities, Delhi and Bangalore, are part of this. As Richa mentioned, air pollution is a major challenge, not just in India, but globally. The World Bank estimated that in 2016, air pollution cost the global economy $5.7 trillion, or 4.4% of global GDP. And as Nitin mentioned, we all know that air pollution takes a huge toll on human health and well-being. In India, while the problem is, of course, particularly acute in Delhi and the northern part of the country, the majority of Indian cities and even many rural areas do not meet the country's own ambient air quality standards. Air pollution is such a complex problem with so many causes and sources that it can sometimes appear intractable. But with all the immense difficulties that it has brought, this period of lockdown has demonstrated that air quality can improve and it is possible to make a difference to levels of air pollution. However, it is important to remember, and as we've seen in the examples shared from California and Chile, that progress on air pollution is also possible in other circumstances. I'd like to share an example from New York City. When he was mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg formulated Plan NYC, a plan for a greener, greater New York. As part of this plan, one of its key goals was to significantly reduce air pollution and improve air quality in the city. Research found that one of the biggest sources of air pollution in New York was heating from buildings where boilers were burning dirty oil to derive heat. In order to address this, regulation and laws requiring a reduction of sulfur content and eventual phasing out of the dirtier heating oils were introduced. To accompany these regulations and encourage a rapid switchover, the city administration, working with business, industry, and civil society, launched the New York City Clean Heat Initiative. As a result of this and other measures, sulfur pollution reduced by nearly 70% and particulate pollution reduced by over 20%, leading to New York City having its cleanest air in 50 years. The NYC Clean Heat Initiative engaged with residents to communicate the benefits of switching to cleaner fuel, provided technical assistance for those looking to make the switch, and developed innovative financing through public-private mechanisms to be able to help fund the change. Business and industry, including real estate, utilities, and banks, were key partners in this initiative. Now, if we draw some insights based on the New York City example, and also on other examples of air quality improvements, I think we can identify 4 key ingredients that help drive progress. The first is better evidence and data about the levels of air pollution. In New York City, it was improved data on air quality that helped identify heating as a major source of air pollution in the city. And we've also heard from California and Chile about the role that evidence and data have played in driving reductions there. The second is policy leadership. high-level leadership in introducing innovative policies and driving interagency coordination has been really important. The third is people and public awareness, which has driven both demand and behavior change for cleaner air. And it's really encouraging the findings of the report that Richa shared that has surveyed people and found the majority in favor of stronger measures for cleaner air. The fourth is partnerships. And here, business and industry have a key role to play. In many cities that have achieved air quality improvements, there have been partnerships formed between governments, business industry associations, and others that have helped drive progress. And we're beginning to see several new partnerships, such as the Cleaner Air, Better Life initiative, formed here in India on air pollution, which leaves me hopeful that progress is possible. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. A big thank you to all our speakers. We have some time for some questions, so I'll try and ask just one round of questions and just sort of building on some of the comments that were there. So maybe, Richa, I'll just sort of start with you and just leaving off a little bit from what Priya talked about, which was the the innovative financing things that came in and addressing some of the challenges from New York. But also building on some of the things that you talked about almost 2/3, I think you said about 70% saying that this is a public health issue. I guess one of the things that we've sort of faced is are there enough funds? Is this a big enough problem from a public health point of view? Is there enough sort of that comment that was made, that outcry, the word that was used I think by Michael, to put enough funds to address this issue?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Nitin. I think we're seeing more and more an increase of awareness in India on the impact of air pollution on people's health. I think that increase is, it remains a very sort of Delhi-centric conversation and a narrative, and it has been. But I think we're seeing a lot more conversations now starting to trickle around smaller cities, tier 2 cities, and other cities like Mumbai. And I think what has also happened in the past few years is that the field of sort of air pollution action, both civil society organizations, donors, and other stakeholders, there's been an increase of participation from these groups on air quality programming. There's definitely been an increase in terms of funding on air quality programming, and that's one of the things that the Clean Air Fund also tracks, is both philanthropic as well as donor supported programs and funding to air quality programs. We in fact track about $203 million worth of programs from 2018 to 2019. And while that sounds like quite a bit of money, that money was sort of spent globally. Years, it was only concentrated for programs in the US and China and some in India, though now there's been a shift, a broader shift in terms of these where the money is flowing through. But really the question is, no, we as philanthropy, we don't have enough money to tackle the problem. We definitely need more government financing. We definitely need more bilateral financing in terms of building infrastructure development and other solutions-led projects. And that while there is a growing consensus that health must kind of lead the way, we definitely need more involvement of the health sector to be champions on making sure that this truly does become a public health issue. And we're seeing that more and more in India, but we have a way to go. Yeah.
Right. I fully agree with that. Actually, I'll build on that a little bit, and Michael, maybe come to you. And I thought what was really interesting was, which also Richard talked about and touched on, was the need for almost data. And I thought you used some really interesting words. You suggested that having that network was allowed you to do precise regulations. We may sort of paraphrase it as surgical strikes, which was the choice, the norm for not too long ago. But maybe you could just talk a little bit about, how does, creating a data network and having that quality of data available, and to Richard's sort of comment about also getting more people to participate and be able to see the value and spending some of the cost behind some of this.
Absolutely. So California is actually divided up into 38 local air districts. And the basis for that division of California is because those regions have unique geographies, unique air quality, and also sort of different authorities and sources of air pollution. And what we have found through our air monitoring network is that as we develop air quality plans, there are parts of California that attain the standards much sooner than other parts. And so it allows us to focus our air quality plans and programs on very targeted specific parts of the state. So for example, for us, our major focus is on the South Coast Air Basin, which is in the Los Angeles area, and then the San Joaquin Valley, which is a large agricultural area in the center of California. And by doing that, we don't impose the same burdens on industry across the state, and that allows us to really focus our limited resources from a control perspective on those parts of the state that have the most serious air quality problems. And that's really an important way of harnessing support from industry as well as the public.
Great, thank you. And maybe you could just talk, just to build a little bit about that in terms of building that network to begin with. I mean, how did you sort of go about, making those type of decisions as to, because this is obviously going to be quite a sophisticated network, and choice of where you put the network would have been a very critical part of that decision making.
Sure. So there are certain minimum requirements that are established under the Clean Air Act as regards the number of monitors based on the severity of a region's air quality problem. And so we use that as sort of the benchmark, but what we have done and the local air districts have done is then added additional monitors to develop what's actually a much more robust monitoring network. What we have also found over time, and this is a recent phenomenon, is that with the advent of low-cost sensors, that citizens are deploying their own air monitoring networks, and that is providing us with not as precise data, but also just very useful information on the extent of air pollution problems. And we're seeing that right now with the wildfires in California, that citizens are really turning to these dispersed networks of low-cost citizen monitors. And then the last piece that we're now relying more and more on is satellites, and using that to help us to better understand the extent of air pollution problems across California and how it changes over time. So the tools that we use are evolving, and that we expect to see that continuing to change over time as technology improves.
Thank you. Let me then just come to you, Marcelo. I thought it was incredibly interesting, the story of Santiago to the smaller cities, and maybe just sort of comment. We would love to hear a little bit more about, especially the wood burning aspect of it. But one of the other things that also really stood out for me was this almost seamlessness between air pollution and CO2, and it almost sort of seemed to be just one continuum flow for you. So maybe you could just speak a little bit about, how is that, taken forward, and how have you sort of built that public awareness capability, but also the institutional knowledge to be able to make that flow happen?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first off, on the this sort of integrating the vision, it's something you could see between the approach the U.S. takes versus Europe takes on air pollution and climate. For many years in Europe, diesel was supported because they thought it was good for climate. And also wood burning was also supported because it was supposed to be carbon neutral. But those who work in the air quality agenda know that this is pretty questionable at the very least, but also comes at a very high cost to health. And so therefore, since we had done these emission standards and we had estimated what the marginal cost to the population was due to the health impacts, well, we took a next step and said, why don't we just use this and tax them for it? And I forgot about to tell you about the new car tax also, which is pretty stiff if it's a dirty car, $5,000 if it's a dirty, diesel truck, versus, This is we're pretty clean in this discussion. We don't subsidize electric cars. We just charge them less of a tax. And if it's a plug-in hybrid and it's got some pollution, it's still going to pay $100. So it's sort of like the extreme way of trying to internalize this. And it's really important that we do this because when Chile always prided itself to be a free and open economy. But this is an illusion if you're not internalizing externalities. And so you could really call out the economist on this contradiction. And so therefore, when we have these taxes go in, it happened in seamlessly. We are part of the Clean Air and Climate Coalition. It's a crucial institution. But we have reached this point, and it wasn't easy because when I was Minister of the Environment, I blended the air pollution and climate agenda divisions, and these guys are like oil and water. They did not want to work together. They have other outcomes. We're thinking about 4 years. The other guys are thinking about 30 years, and it was hard. But really glued this thing together was the electrical sector that figured out that if they do able to clean out the air and expand more renewables and get into the clean heating and clean transport. So they helped us, and that figure, the integrated figure I showed you, was something I had in my mind that was probably going to happen. But this is actually the energy sector that put that together, the coal guys, but also that know that what's for dinner now, what the new capacity is, it's all renewable. 99% of new installed capacity in Chile today is renewable. We got $20 billion in investments happening right now. So it wasn't spontaneous and it wasn't easy. And I'm pretty sure if we stop, the mixing, they're still going to separate into oil and water again. But, for now, we're doing pretty good.
That's really great to say. I actually, maybe I'll take off on that one, and for the last question before we can open up for Q&A. And Priya, I think I just reflected as Marcela just talked about the oil and water concept, but you also just spoke about it. I think in terms of the partnership side of it, one of the 4 key ingredients between business and industry. So let's maybe take this as a coaching or feedback moment for myself. So we have the forum, this India CEO Forum for clean air. How do you see platforms such as ours playing a role, and what could we learn and to do better in that space?
Thanks, Nitin. I think forums such as the forum can play a really powerful role in trying to drive reduction in air pollution. And I think there's a few different ways in which business and industry can contribute. The first is by adopting and using cleaner technologies and practices in production, and also looking for innovative solutions and circular economy business models. In India, in Surat, where we're supporting work, we're seeing the construction sector come together to try to adopt cleaner construction practices. In Patna, where we're also supporting work, there has been a move among brick kiln manufacturers to adopt cleaner zigzag technologies. And another innovative example is from IKEA, which is developing products with crop residue, the burning of which contributes to air pollution. The second, and I think Marcelo also referred to this, is through the demand signals they can send to drive a broader transition to a cleaner, greener economy. For example, could businesses consider shifting to electric vehicles for transporting their employees and supplies? Could they adopt energy efficiency measures and switch to renewable sources of energy? Could increased work from home practices in certain types of businesses continue? The third is through CSR projects. Indian businesses have developed many interesting environmental CSR projects, and the CII crop burning residue project is an interesting example. Another example is from London, where there's an initiative where the London government and local businesses jointly put in funds for local measures to address air pollution, such as anti-idling campaigns, greening, and other activities. And the fourth is really, which is where the CEO Forum is so powerful, is through their leadership and advocacy. Business and industry leaders can help ensure that tackling air pollution is a priority for government and broader society. As we think about efforts to improve air quality, we have to see these not just in isolation, but as an integral part of broader sustainable development and green recovery strategies. And business and industry will have a critical role to play in these efforts.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna close out there, but I think it's incredibly rich sort of conversation. I'm conscious we're at time, so so in the interest, apologies, I wasn't able to open up for public Q&A, but what I wanted to say was that there was incredibly common threads to what I at least heard and took away. A very strong sense on data and being able to put that forward and also costing the externalities, being able to put them on the table, being clear on the economic issues, challenges that were there. I mean, that was clear from the examples that we heard from Chile and from California and from New York, but also equally what Richard put forward in terms of what we're hearing that was there. Equally, really important was recognizing the role the public has, and in terms of driving some of these forward, and how to actually make sure that it's a very informed sort of discussion that we all have. I thought there was a rich discussion there about incentives and disincentives. So how do you choose to tax and how do you choose to structure this so that you economically creating the right motivators to be able to push all of us in the right direction, both as consumers, as industries, and any one of us going forward. And then how does it all sort of come together, right? In terms of the right partnerships and creating the right forums and the right. The word that stood out, of course, was leadership, and leadership to ensure that we're able to make this an issue and be able to drive the agenda forward. So with that, I'd like to close out the session, but first let me say a big thank you to my panelists. I've truly enjoyed this session. As I started out this panel, this is what I love about the role that I have. I get to hear such a great richness of the examples, the experiences, and I learned tremendously from them. And I sincerely hope that all the people who have been able to join us and others who may hopefully download and listen to us will also take this forward and together we can come and make an impact. My last comment is it's just to come back and say that this is, of course, something that we all need to do together, and so this is a little bit more for a call for action. So if you're sitting and listening to this, or wherever you are, whenever you choose to do it, my invitation is to come and participate and be a part of the discussion and debate. As you can hear from everybody, we need everybody to come in and bring the ideas, bring the capabilities, but also drive for action, drive for change, and help to come and make it happen. So with that, let me close out this session. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Seema, sorry I couldn't do an open Q&A.
No, that's good. It was a great session. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
you guys.
And thanks, Seema. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
Bye.